Welcome, everybody, to this eHealth Learning podcast, a space where we encourage the sharing of knowledge and the support that that brings. Today, I'm talking with Monica Anna, astrologer, author, and coach. If you do have questions for Anna, she encourages, for Monica, sorry, to put your questions in the chat at the end. But if anything comes up and arrives while she's talking, she's willing to take them. So we will be checking the chat box as we go. Oh, okay. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
how are you today?
I am excited to be here. Astrology is one of my favorite subjects. I don't know if we have the next 3 to 6 hours booked to talk about it. I'll try to keep it quite contained. But yeah, it is one of my favorite subjects. So I'm really, really happy to share
Oh,
my passion with you all. So let
well,
me
thank you. Thank you for agreeing to come on and share your knowledge. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Thank you. So let me share my screen. I have prepared some slides to help me kind of keep me. Let me see if you can see my screen.
Yeah, that looks great.
Uh, and fabulous. So let me just move that here. Again, thank you for Anatoly for inviting me here. Thank you for having me. My plan for today will be to share a little bit about the moon and her phases and the journey that she's taking and how in astrology we're perceiving her and using that archetype in practice. And I hope that it will be, interesting and intriguing and will raise some questions from you and will set you on a journey to actually explore a little bit more. Um, so let us begin. So I am Monica Anna. I am an astrologer and mindfulness coach based in West Midlands. But I'm actually originally from Poland. So I relocated to another country, well, nearly 20 years ago now. And my background is in education, journalism, and corporate finance, which is always funny to say when I'm doing an astrology talk because it does actually fit with my chart and my horoscope very well, even though it feels quite disjointed. So I don't know if we can have people commenting in a box, but have you actually ever seen a natal chart or any astrological chart, whether in newspaper or have it actually done for yourself, had an astrological reading? I wanted to bring it here because it gives an idea, even just that mandala that we can see gives an idea of complexity that it holds. And very often astrology is compared to the sun astrology, to that sun comments that, oh, Capricorn, you're going to have an amazing week. Which has some validity to it. But when we're looking at the person, they are so much more than just sun. They're the moon, they're their Saturn, they're their Venus, and all the combinations and relationships between those planets. So today we will be talking about that little piece in here that is the moon. Um,
One,
yeah,
yeah, we got a couple of people who said that
oh,
yes, they are familiar with the chart. So that's
lovely.
great.
That's great. So let's talk about the moon. Um, Today we'll cover, and I appreciate I'll try to squeeze a lot in that hour, so it will be quite high level. But today we'll try to cover moon and personality. So, whoops, sorry, trying to fiddle with presentation. So, what does the astrological moon actually tell us? What does it tell us in the chart? What are the moon quarters? What are the 8 phases? How do they relate to sun? Do we need to relate them to the sun? What and how do we approach the moon and personality, and how can you connect with the moon? So that will be main part of the presentation today. And then I'll touch a little bit about journeying beyond with the zodiac, with the houses, and with 27-year cycles. So with moon, there's quite a lot to explore. There are layers upon layers, and I think this is astrology full stop. We have a planet that we can talk about, the archetypal meaning of that planet. That planet is then based in a sign. So we then layer the sign and how that sign dresses the planet, if you will. Then we put that planet in a house, and obviously that's the area of life. And then we put that planet in relationship with other planets. So there's just so many layers that we can go with. And then they have their own specific cycles. So Moon has a very specific 27, 30-year cycle, which I will mention at the end. But in general, in astrology, Moon has so many phases. To mention few, moon represents our body, our actual physical body, and also our emotional body. So I was saying to Natalie before we just started that this is a lovely idea that when we incarnate, the soul that actually takes embodiment here on earth is coming through the moon portal. I love that kind of metaphor. But also when we're talking about our emotions and our physical body, we can also see how they relate, how we actually carry our emotions in our body, the stress in our neck. Something that we cannot digest emotionally, then gives us a stomach ache. I know I'm kind of obviously simplifying the symptoms that we experience in our body, but that psychosomatic connection has been, obviously researched. So I don't have to speak to that. But I love that actually astrology was talking about this as well. As an archetype, we both the physical and emotional body, and we are connected. Moon also represents our mother or mother figure, how she was perceived by us, and this is also very often that I'm very careful to say this is not an objective description of your mother. So if I looked at someone's chart and I saw the moon, this is not the mother as she was. This is the mother as it was perceived by that child. And again, that child's sibling might have had completely different perception of the mom. The moon can tell in a chart about how that mother nurtured us, or for the, didn't nurture us. What was her parenting style? How did we learn from her or from another mothering figure? How to give and receive love, and how to actually receive nourishment as well. Um, Moon in astrology also speaks to our ancestral patterns and that generational karma or generational trauma, if you will. Again, going through that maternal line, it's what emotional hang-ups, emotional trauma, and issues we carry through generation, through our mom, through our nan, through our great nan. What is it that is happening on that layer in the family that we can see? There are other places in the horoscope that obviously talk about that, but Moon very much talks about that passing on the karma and tradition and conditioning through the family, especially through that mother line. And again, that conditioning that we're getting as children, um, in our household, the messages, the stories that we are told, the stories that, oh, our family are the salt of the earth, oh, our family was always full of creatives. We carry those stories for generations. That moon would speak to that. It would speak to our different needs for nourishment and how we feed not only our bodies, but also our souls. So I'm always smiling when people say, oh, do unto others what you want them to do unto you. And I would say, well, do unto others what their moon needs. Because you might have a different needs, right? You might have a very earthy moon. So what you need for nourishment is the contact with nature. It's beautiful food, it's the kind of plush, comfortable sofa. But someone with a fiery moon will see that as being trapped, being, too confined or too restricted. They might need an excitement. They might need an adventure. They might need someone to say, hey, let's just jump in a car and just drive somewhere for the weekend. And that will excite them, that will nourish their soul, that will replenish them for another week, at work, for example. If you say that to a moon in Taurus, for example, they'll go, well, where is the plan? Where are the snacks? Do we have comfortable sleeping bags? They need something else. So, again, moon shows us what nourishment do we need and how we give nourishment. Very often we give what we know and how we learn that. So again, if I have moon in Taurus, which I do, I love feeding people, literally. I love being the hostess. I love, creating food, having people around the table, enjoying food. And that's the way I also nourish others. That not necessarily means that's how they need to be nourished, but that's how I go about that. So again, looking at the moon and what it represents sometimes can help us, even in our relationships with children, with partners, with, close colleagues. What is it that you need? Because what I'm giving might not necessarily be what you need. So that's a lovely place to start. How can I nourish your soul? Um, Moon represents the place of safety and home and where we feel most comfortable. So again, that idea of being at home in your body, but also what home or safety look like to you. Um, and the beauty of the sun is that sun is our core self. So there's this relationship between sun and moon dynamic, which we'll explore just now. And sun is the core. It never changes. It always rises. It always sets. We don't see sun in phases, and when we relate that to us, this is that core, essential divine spark that we have, that core of who we are. Moon, on the other hand, it has phases and has faces as well, different faces that we, portray to the world. Those are all those different personalities. We are different in a role as a mom with our children. We will be completely different in a role as a CEO in our company. We will be different with our friends on a night out with a drink, and we'll be different with the, I don't know, in a charity gig. So those are different personalities, different side of us that moon also can speak to. And again, that relationship between sun and moon is so important because it's usually the sun embody its own essence, if I can say that, through the moon, through the sign of the moon. So we tend to, so to speak, do our sun often through the moon. I hope that that makes sense. Um, so when we go now to the moon, the easiest way to start observing moon is to look out for the four main quarters. And it is surprising sometimes for me to hear how people, obviously they will absolutely recognize the full moon. It's this big white ball in a dark sky, but not many people will see that really little crescent of the sky. In here, it's actually on this picture, it's actually in a dark sky. But very often that sliver of the moon, that little crescent will actually appear in the sky when there is still sun there, and not many people will notice because, again, we live busy life. We're on our phones, we're in our cars, we're picking up children, we're going to work, we need to do shopping. We are in our modern lives getting disconnected from that natural rhythm, so we don't tend to very often be aware of what that is. And I always encourage people that ultimately, if you want to start your journey, start from that easiest denominator. So start with the new moon and the full moon, or start with the four quarters, because that will give you the flavor and hopefully will get you, going further. So if you compare those four quarters, new moon and first quarter and a full moon and last quarter, we can liken them to our seasons. So obviously spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And the way they correspond with each other is in the depth of the dark winter, we have that new moon where actually sometimes I call it a no moon night. Again, I don't know if you're watching now or if you're going to watch later. Have you actually seen the moon in the sky or the kind of dark hole that is in the sky? Seeing the moon on the night of no moon, as I call it, it's really quite spooky because it kind of feels like this is beautiful starry heaven, and there is that weird black hole in that tapestry that the moon is there, but there is no light shining through it. So it's quite unnerving, I always think. But that's the time that we can think of. The night of the new moon is the time of the dark winter. We usually we want to be within, we want to kind of concentrate on ourselves, we want to dream the dream, we want to be cozy and let those seeds of dreams germinate. That's the kind of feel usually around the new moon. And then we have the first quarter, which is our spring. So that's where that energy kicks in. So again, during the moon cycle, if you think about, what's the energy or what I want to observe, the first quarter will be that kick that, okay, we need to now get the, gear, sorry, kick into gear. We need to put our plans into action. This is the moment when we need to break through that frozen soil, like in spring, that break through and take actions on our goals that we dreamt at the night of the new moon. And then we have the full moon, that kind of summer vibe of culmination and energy and excitement. And you just want to be in the sun celebrating. No wonder that Leo archetype is the archetype in August. You just want to be there, celebrating achievements, sharing with community, just enjoying, having good time. And then we have the last quarter, which is the autumn. This is the last quarter. This is us turning again inwards. It's the time of turning into the dark side of the year during the autumn. And I think, sorry, I've noticed that I put spring here. This is actually autumn, obviously. So it's that time where at the spring equinox, the darkness won with the light, and the darkness will be getting longer and deeper. And it's the time where, we need to let go. Literally, in nature, there is the death and rebirth. And I think in a cycle, when we're talking about the emotions as well, this is the time where supports that letting go, support that reflective mode. If we're thinking about last quarter as autumn, it's that moment where we need to let the leaves fall and sleep, over the winter so they can be reborn again in spring. So those are the kind of main, obviously, quarters, and we can divide that even further into 8 phases of the moon, and we can also link that to a personality. So one thing that I always find fascinating is when we begin to grow that archetypal ear, when we begin to grow that metaphorical, mythical ear, when we're hearing the stories that people say, very often we can actually hear an underlying archetype. And there's one lady that shared with me, literally, this is what she said to me about her birth, that she was born in the middle of the night, in the middle of the winter, in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the prairie. And I'm like, you need to start your autobiography with these words because this is so powerful. I mean, just hearing that, I already get the flavor of who you are as a personality. Someone who is born in the middle of the night, in winter, in storm, you can only if that was a character in the book, you already would have a flavor of what they bring into this world, what that character will be able to achieve, what kind of person they will be, how they will react to things. As opposed to, for example, this is actually a quote from the song, if someone was born on a hot afternoon, the last day of June, and the sun was a demon, the clouds are afraid. I mean, the pavement was steaming hot. When you hear that, again, if that was a character in your favorite novel, you would know exactly what that person, that character was, who they were. And I think when we're hearing those stories, um, very often you kind of get that ear, as an astrologer for, okay, I can hear your Saturn speaking, or I can hear your Venus coming through, because you begin to recognize the themes and the archetypes that coming through. Um, and I always encourage to people, tell yourself the story, or tell yourself the story of your family, and see, from that mythical point of view, if you were the character of your own autobiography, how would you start that? I think there is something to dig into that. That seed, talking about new moon, that seed of what you brought up with to this world. If you were to think about your own birth, your own, so to speak, new moon, the stories about, oh, how my mum was rushed to hospital and gave birth in a taxi, and ever since, I was always late for everything or too quick for everything. Those are our personal myths that work so beautifully with archetypes. And those 8 phases of the moon can tell us not just about what is the energy of the month, which is quite subtle. When we think about um, the moon, it changes every 2, 3 days. So we're going through those 8 phases in a space of 28 days. That's pretty quick. That's very subtle cycle to follow. So one thing that I love doing is comparing those 8 phases to that neo-pagan Wiccan wheel of the year, because again, it gives us the flavor. So when people say, what is the waxing crescent like, or what's the third quarter like, if we then have that correspondence between the lunar phase and the sun cycle, I feel like it's easier for us to understand the kind of energy. It's different energy, it's obviously more subtle and linked to our bodies and our emotions, but it gives us the flavor um, and that energy. So, um, one thing to mention before we go and explore each individual phase as well is we are all born under one of those phases. So, we are either born on the night of the dark moon, or maybe a couple days later, or just before the full moon in that waxing gibbous phase. And again, when we're thinking about our birth and what was happening around us, and what our mother felt, what was happening around us, that definitely had an imprint of who we are. I'm not by any means saying that moon pulls a strings, or creates a magic, or changes some kind of energy. But when we think about, like I said, our own personal stories, um those stories shapes us. So being born on a full moon, at midnight, again, the whole family will tell the story about that little, child that was born at full moon and could not sleep through the night, and we will carry that within us. I've just noticed that someone posted a question, what the gibbous means. Gibbous phase is that, I don't know if I can show on here. Can you see this? Can I? Sorry. Um, this moon, it's kind of full, but not quite there. It's that kind of, this is the gibbous phase, where we're a little bit, over the halfway point, and we're not quite full yet, or the other way, we were just full. This is the crescent. So this is the difference. I think, Catherine, hope that answer the question. This is the chunky one. I always I always I have my own name, so I always say the thin one or the chunky one. But for me, the gibbous moon is the chunky one up there. Sorry, up here. This is the gibbous phase, and this would be the crescent one. Um, so sorry, just going back to my notes. So moon cycle, obviously, it's very, very quick, very subtle. We need to tune in with that kind of gentle, mindful awareness. And what I always ask as well is that, do we even have space in our lives, being so, busy and always on the run, in our modern world, that do we even realize what mood we are in, what our needs are, what our body needs? Very often when I hear people, saying, "Oh, I don't think moon has any influence," or "I haven't noticed anything," and I'm like, well, have you actually noticed that you're hungry today? Like, how often have we worked through the day and then like 5 or 6 o'clock, it's like, oh my God, I have not even eaten anything. Let me just go to the fridge and quickly grab something. How often do we notice that, I just blow up on my husband and I was super angry, but actually it wasn't anger, it was grief that wasn't processed. And again, I have not noticed. How often do we have, that um, tenseness in our body from stress that we do not notice until we need to go and visit chiropractor because our neck is giving us grief. So I'm thinking very often we can't notice what's happening within us, within our bodies, with our emotion sphere. How can we then, look into that subtlety in the cycles around us? And what I love about this work, and what I love about actually working with the moon, is that it brings us back in touch with ourselves. It brings us back in touch with our body, with our emotions, with our needs. It's very mindful practice. Ultimately, one of the metaphors I give, it's very often with our bodies, we will, it's like with a car, we will run out of fuel and the car stops. Um, it's just because we ignore the warning light. The warning lights were there, but we completely ignore them. And I think with our bodies, or with moon subtlety, the signs are there. We just sometimes choose to ignore them. Um, so Moon is such such an amazing teacher, and that connection to the ebb and flow of the energy throughout the month, by observing the face and being aware of the face, and of our levels, can actually help us get in touch with it. So let's go back to the 8 phases. So when we compare the new moon, again, I've mentioned when we looked at the quarters, the new moon would be our winter solstice. So it's the time that is super subjective. It's the time about darkness. If you ever been in a countryside and see, the night of the new moon, it's always very quiet in a countryside. Everything stops, everything dreams, everything germinates. And if we were to again link that to personality, who would be born at the new moon? It would be the subjective type. The moon and the sun is so close together that there is no space for objectivity. My feelings and who I am and what I want, it's all merged into one. They're absolute pure energy and pure potential. And then we have our crescent. So we have the sliver of the moon that is like a little hope of light coming up. And this is linked to the festival of Imbolc, which is at the end of January when the first snowdrops are pushing through. And again, this new moon, sorry, this waxing crescent gives us that hope of renewal, hope of the light rising again, like the Imbolc in January. We can see that the life is trying to get through the darkness, through the night, through the snow, through the still frozen ground, and it's trying to break through. Again, it's that toughness and that fight for survival, that is usually embodied with the people born under that phase. So it's that kind of vision and vision of the new moon that we carry, that I need to now fight for survival to actually be able to bring that vision into. And again, during the month, if we're looking at that crescent sage, this is the moment where, we need to get tougher. This is not the moment that we lock in and get dreamy. This is the month where, hey ho, we need to face the music, so to speak. Um, then we are going into spring equinox. Spring equinox, Ostara. Um, this is called crisis in action. because this is the moment where in a sun cycle, we move from the dark side of the year to bright side of the year, the equal night and day. And in a moon cycle, again, this is when we have the dreaming phase in new moon. We have the waxing crescent where we kind of broke through the obstacles. But now the question is, what actions are we taking to bring those dreams forward? We dreamt them, but what is the structure? What are where is the plan? What are the actions? Are we fully committed? This is the first quarter is the crisis in action, because the question is, are you taking action? Are you fully committing and stepping into that, or you're not? And again, personality are the one that, they are committed ones. Those are the people who will execute, who will ensure that, those dreams get embodied. And with waxing gibbous, this is where we are just about getting to full moon, but not quite there yet. So this is the moment of the perfecting phase. It's the moment in May when everything is bloom, but not quite summer, full bloom summer yet. This is the moment where, before project, we have the last editing touches or last minute changes. And with the waxing gibbous, because we're closer to the full moon, we're far away from the sun now in terms of moon and sun relationships, we're getting a little bit more objectivity. When we're close to the sun and moon, they were so close together, they were so intertwined that it's very subjective phase. When we're actually getting closer to the full moon, we're getting objectivity. So actually what we plan or plotted in the new moon, we can actually now change and edit and maybe actually bring something else to make sure that that we can perfect that for the full moon. So those types, the waxing gibbous types, they will be the one that growing in maturity and growing in objectivity as well. Full moon, our summer solstice, the Leo season. This is the crowning glory of the cycle. It's where we are the moon and the sun are in opposition to each other. So there's loads of space for objectivity, but also because they're in opposition to each other, we have that polarity. It's either or. We either super involved with the new moon or super detached from the from that new moon seed. Very often it can create that black and white approach. It create that we can create our success story and celebrate it at the full moon at the cost of rejecting everything and everyone that does not support that. So I know better kind of thing. And then we have the waning gibbous, which is Lamas, which is our harvest festival. So again, we celebrated with the new moon. We got, yeah, I achieved that. Oh, sugar, I did not achieve that. So, but it was the full moon. It was the time of the peak of the season and accomplishment. Now we kind of gone past that. There's the moment, you know what? I actually really want to celebrate with my friends. If I achieved, I don't know, if I had a book launch, I might invite friends to, to party. If I, got promoted, hey, I might invite my spouse for a nice dinner. If I don't know, achieved amazing relationships, because it's not necessarily about achievement, I mean, in material, but hey, I have amazing a relationship with my husband. This is the full moon. We're celebrating who we are together. And with the waning gibbous, with that harvest, is that moment where we actually allow everything that we've learned in that first phase, in that waning phase up to the full moon, when we allow to share and enjoy and teach as well. This is the moment when we are disseminating everything that we've learned, and we're teaching others as well. Like learn from my mistakes, type people as well. And then we're going to the dark side of the year. So again, we have the third quarter, which is the last quarter, another crisis point, which is linked to an autumn equinox. So again, this is the moment where the darkness wins. We're going to that dark half of the year. So it becomes the time of reflection on what what is needed on a journey into the underworld. We need the courage to fall into the depth of another dream, of another adventure. This is the time where, okay, I achieve something. I share that with my family, with my community, with my tribe. I shared with them the fruits of my labor. I've shared with them my teachings, my learnings. What is it that, I want to do next? And this is usually the point where a personality type as well, that they can already see that next new moon. They can already see that next seed they want to plant. They can already see that next new dream, but no one else can see that around them. So this is the time where you achieve something amazing at work and you're like, okay, well, I achieved that. I want to move on to something else. I don't know. I want to set up my cafe. I've done what I wanted to do as a barista. I want to run cafe by the sea now. And everyone's like, well, why? Well, you completed one dream. You want to move on. You can see something else. Not everyone will understand that. So that takes a lot of strength and courage to follow that calling, and trust, because we are falling into that darkness. I mean, it might be an abyss that we're falling into, not necessarily a dream. And then we have the balsamic moon or waning crescent. And if we collect that to, again, sun cycle, we're talking about Samhain. So this is very much where we're ready to let go of the previous dream, of previous success, of previous expectations, of people's expectations on us. This is the trip of Inanna when she's stripping bare for a renewal. This is the moment where, the last leaves that are still holding on to trees, the storm comes in and just takes them all away. Um, but also this is the personality type that looks so far ahead into that new moon that they are ready to burn the old world down because they can already see the fabric of the new one. So again, we can link that to our personality. We can link that to what's happening throughout the month. If we were looking at those 8 phases throughout the month, okay, well, today is the day of gibbous. Do I have that energy to edit my project, to maybe do some editing in my wardrobe and take things, off and actually to charity? You probably won't want to do that in new moon because you're like, oh, I love that dress and it gives me so much comfort. But at the gibbous phase, I'm like, yep, that dress can go. Absolutely, I'm done with it. So it's, again, just playing with those archetypes and trying to see, how do they work around me. And the way I would encourage, again, that connection with the moon, I usually offer 3 very simple steps. So first of all, I always say, get to know the moon in the sky. Observe her as the way the ancient did. Get connected to her in the sky, not just on the app or on your computer, but actually look out for her. Where does she rises? Which part of your garden or which part of her house? Does she rises, in the morning, or does she rises in the afternoon, in the evening? Have you observed actually all the phases, or is it just usually the full moon that kind of goes straight into your bedroom window and annoys you when you're trying to sleep and you don't have a blackout blinds? So just getting to know the moon in the sky, it creates that subtle connection, which is something beautiful to, I think, to experience when you do that in a mindful way. Um, and the second one, um, get to know yourself. Again, are you mindful of your emotional body, of your physical body, 100% of the time? I know I'm not, um, but I am trying my best to bring that mindful awareness to every day. So again, to work with this cycle is the best. To work with the cycle is best to observe the cycle and see the pattern if the patterns arrive. So I always say, try to play with it and be like an explorer. If I will write down, use my journal, I will write down, actually, the moon was in first quarter, and oh my God, I had this issue. And then again, next month, the moon was in this quarter, and again, I had to push through some kind of thing. by next month, if that arises, you can actually begin to see the pattern that, okay, yeah, that waxing crescent, it's really annoying because it always brings up an obstacle that I have to overcome. But you begin to recognize as well how your body reacts to that, how your mood reacts to that. And I can't emphasize enough how that subtlety works. Like, we are such a complex being. It's not just I am just my moon and just my emotions. It might be a full moon, but actually I got really bad and upsetting news and I'm not in a mood to celebrate. It doesn't have to be a new moon where I just want to sit home and cry and cuddle and so on. So obviously there is nuance to this. Um, but it's beautiful when we actually start looking and making notes in a journal. Every now and then when you go back to that journal, you're surprised how, you pick up, or maybe you're sensitive to specific phase. I've done that some time ago, and I've noticed I'm not a very emotionally expressive person, so I don't tend to cry on cue. I don't cry on romantic comedies or anything like that. But I've noticed that every now and then there was just this moment in a cycle that, I was like really weepy and oh my God. And I was thinking that it might have just been my biological cycle. But then when I actually look at my phone application, and I know I said look at the moon, but I look at my phone application, I noticed that, 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10, when I looked, the moon was in Cancer, which is a very sensitive kind of sign, brings us into that connection with our emotions. So I've noticed that actually moon in specific zodiac sign works for me in this specific one, maybe because I am so connected to air signs and intellect and earth. That time of the cycle really draws me back into my emotions, and that's not something I do maybe often. And then the last option is getting to know your chart. There is loads of free things out there. You can go on a website, draw your own chart, and look at what is the connection between moon and the sun. And then start kind of, again, playing and exploring. Is your moon in connection to the sun in a new moon phase or full moon phase, or, waxing gibbous? Are you the waning or a waxing baby? So you were born, when the moon was growing to be full, or actually when the moon was already shedding light and falling into the darkness again? Are you the first quarter or the last quarter? It's really interesting when we start exploring those little bits. Like, am I going up to the full? Am I the glass half full? Or am I the glass half empty? Am I more of that spring quality of the first quarter, or am I the last quarter of the letting go and death and resurrection and transformation? So that can be, really, really fun. I think I do want astrology to be a little bit fun, because I think we very often we forget when we go for a reading or when we explore things that just playing with those archetypes, just getting to know them is like getting to know a friend. We begin to recognize their specific patterns, and they speak with specific voice to us. I know we're kind of at the end of our sessions. I have 4 more slides and I'll try to be fairly quick. So this is what I've mentioned, that we can actually go beyond, if you want to, as you explore astrology and play with it better, you can actually start bringing other things. So you might want to bring an element to it. So if you have an application and you can see that the moon today is in a fire sign like Aries or Leo, you can recognize that those are the days that maybe are a bit, you're a bit fiery, you might be a bit snappy, or actually you have full of energy, so it's easier to run around with kids. You can start playing with the moon sign. So again, if you want to take it even further, you can start noting that actually today moon is in Aries, and I had so much energy. I did my school run. I picked up, I don't know, I did my shopping. I wrote a 10,000 word, for my new book, whatever it is. And then actually a few days later, the moon it was in Taurus, and actually the only thing I wanted was a lovely, beautiful meal with my family. I'm kind of, again, speaking to those very stereotypical archetypal patterns, but just to give you the flavor. Uh, you know, again, taking it even further, in your horoscope, we divide horoscope into 12 houses. So the planet is the energy. So let's say moon is the energy of your mother, of your emotions. The sign is how that energy is expressed. So is moon expressing itself through Taurus? Is moon expressing itself through Aries? And then the house is where that energy is expressing itself. So houses talks about areas of life. So that moon in Aries might be expressing itself in sixth house, and that's the house of being of service. So maybe your mom was actually, pioneering nurse, and serving people, or serving people in community some other way. Or that moon might be in a house of ninth house of higher learning, and there might be, element of, I don't know, mom might have then stopped being a mom and became a Buddhist nun, or mom was actually a tutor at university, because it's the higher learning is also the place where we meet our gurus as well. So it gives you yet another layer of that. And then how is your soul journey through the zodiac? So we have something called a progressed chart, and that chart is we basically move the sun 1 degree every year. And now we're getting technical, because this is basically a technical part. So if you were born in March in the sign of Aries, and you were born, let's say, at 5 of Aries, on the day of your birthday, the sun would be at 6 degrees Aries. And then day of your second birthday, the sun would be 7 degrees Aries, and so on. So the sun moves 1 degree every year, and each planet, because obviously they have different cycles around the sun, they will either move quicker or slower. So the sun takes roughly 30 years, obviously 30 degrees, to move through the sign. The moon takes around a couple years. So within that technique, we can also see how your moon progress. So you might have been born under the new moon phase, just to keep it super simple, and your moon might have been in Taurus when you were born. So this is ultimately your core, who you are. You're the new moon baby. You express, yourself and nurture yourself through Taurian archetype. But actually, in 2 years' time, when you were 2 years old, that moon from beginning of Taurus would have moved to Gemini. So in 2 years' time, you actually became very talkative baby. And then 2 years later, it moved to Leo and sorry, to Cancer, and to Leo, and so on. So it's also interesting to check again as an adult, where is my moon now? What phase am I under now? Moon will complete that cycle within 27 years. So it will take moon 27 years to go from the position of our birth all the way around the zodiac, and um, into the same position again. And it will go for two years through all those signs, giving us a longer period of time, longer cycle, to explore that archetype. So even though we are locked, so to speak, to our natal chart, this is who we are, we want to explore other things. So again, with our body and our emotions, if we're working with that and we're being mindful of that, we will notice that actually, you know, for 2 years I was very much, in Cancer mode. The progress moon might have been going through Cancer, and I was concentrating on my roots, on setting up a beautiful family home, on looking after my children. And then suddenly moon moved to Leo sign, and oh my God, where is that fire coming out? And now I want to concentrate on my creativity, and I want to actually not just concentrate on being mommy and cooking things for my children, but actually playing with them, and, being creative with them, and maybe going to art class with them. So we will recognize that in our own life as we look through that cycle as well, that actually we are changing, and our moods changing, and our personalities changing. And throughout that cycle, we have different needs as well. So, Natalie, I can see we're at 10 to, so I think I need to wrap up, right?
Okay, but you need to
Yeah.
mention your book. I mean, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. but I think, yeah, it's really important that you do that, and then we can look at any
Thank you.
questions
Thank you.
that are in the
So
chat box.
yes, so one thing that I am quite passionate about is actually getting people to be excited about astrology. As astrologer, I always say, I don't want you to believe me, and I don't want you to believe astrology. And I always say, I'm an astrologer. I do not believe in astrology. For me, astrology is not my belief system. Astrology for me is a tool that I use to, it's the language that I use to recognize the cycles, the patterns, the language of the universe, if you will. That's the way, astrology translates that language for me, but there are other ways to translate that language. So what I always say to people is just go and play and, find it for yourself. So last year, I actually launched the book in UK, and actually this year in March, there was a second launch because the book was picked up by a publisher in US and Canada as well. And it's a Astroluna journal. It's actually a journal. It takes you through a introduction of how to play with moon. It has a space for each archetype. So we're talking from Aries through Taurus to obviously Aquarius and Pisces. And it talks about the archetype. It talks about what is about a new moon in Aquarius and then a full moon in Aquarius. And it actually has a space there for you to set your intention, to make your notes, to reflect. There are some prompts for reflection as well if you need to. So that's the kind of beating heart of that journal. And then again, you have a third chapter which talks about again what I just touched about a little bit about that progressed phase. But what I really wanted to create is something, again, my moon in Taurus, I wanted to feed people in a very practical, material way. It's not airy fairy. I want you to have a book that you're going to use, that you're going to write, that's going to live every month, twice a month, you're going to grab it and use it. And then every other month you'll kind of review, actually, I have full moon in Leo now. Let me have a quickly look what was the new moon in Leo 6 months before. Is there a correlation? Is there a theme? And trying to open you up to that language or that relationship. So yeah, thank you for listening. So
Oh.
happy to take any questions now.
There was one question earlier, and I just wanted to say about the book. I think it's really useful to have that reflection, isn't it? And it gets you into the habit of connecting with Moon.
Yeah,
So in a way that kind of becomes familiar with for yourself, doesn't it? So you're creating this personal relationship with the
yeah,
rhythms of nature, with the rhythms of night and day, with, yeah, you can be seasonal, can't you? Because it's
yeah.
monthly. I don't know. I think, yeah, so well done for that. That's amazing.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing. Karen asks about how to balance moon needs with sun needs in a when very polarized in a system.
Um, I'm not sure what she means by
Okay.
polarized system. So I'm not sure. I mean, I can try. So Karen, if you want to type what you mean by that. For me, again, this is not a polarized system because between sun and moon, there's always a relationship. So very often we talked about, again, about oppositions. And for me, there is a difference between polarity and opposition. Ultimately, when we're looking at the chart, there is no beginning or the end. It's everything, it's in a circle, and there is a relationship with every planet. So for me, the balancing of sun and moon energies is very much balancing what is the relationship between them. Is my sun and my moon in relationships of 45 degrees, which is the degrees of the crescent? Is my sun and moon in that opposition? And then if they are planets in opposition, very often, if we're being pulled from one end to another, the idea is to incorporate it both. So the beauty of astrology, it doesn't tell you to be in one side or the other. It tells you to incorporate both. I'm not sure if I'm, replying Karen in a good way, but the one metaphor that comes to mind is when we look at zodiac. You have Leo in opposition to Aquarius. you don't want to be just Leo or just Aquarius. You actually want to have Aquarius cannot serve humanity without generosity and a heart of Leo. Leo heart and generosity can turn into vanity and pride when it's concentrated on an ego, but when it's used for Aquarian um, kind of serving of humanity, it's used in the right way. So it's kind of how do we incorporate that?
Mm. Yeah, I think that's answered her question actually. I
Yeah.
wonder if you would put
And
into the chat the AstroSeek website. So there's a few people who'd like to know where to get their chart,
yeah,
and
so
I know that
there are
you've offered
two
that
websites
one
that,
to
yeah,
me.
I will do that now straight away. There are two websites that I always recommend. So one is astro, I think, .com. And that's one website that I recommend. And then there is, so here it is in a chat. And there is another one for the moon. And actually, I'll try to put birth natal. I'll try to actually take the specific one where you can see your moon phase if I can
Oh,
find
brilliant.
it.
Yeah, thank you.
So uh, yeah, I think that's the one. So I'll think is this one. But yeah, another way to speak about sun and moon, just to go back to current
Okay.
question, is your sun, so who you are, let's say as a Gemini, and what your moon does is you spread your Gemini nature through moon things. Sorry, through moon things. So example for me, I am Aquarius, so I vibe with my tribe. I am, I might be eccentric, but the way I do that as well is in very Taurian way. I need a practical thing. So astrology is perfect. I am an astrologer, and as Aquarius, that works very well with the archetype. But the way I do my astrology is always bring it back to the ground. Literally, I used to say that I want to make astrology, down to earth. I want that to be simple, which again is Taurus. Let's enjoy the simplicity of the senses. When I was writing the book, I wanted something that will be used and touched and utilized, in a month. So again, when we're thinking about Gemini Sun, the core is connecting. Gemini Sun will want to ultimately connect because that's what Gemini does. And again, that kind of duality of the spiritual side and material side, the spiritual twin and material twin, so to speak. But the way it will be going about it is in Taurian way, for example, if that moon is in Taurus. So actually I'll be connecting through material stuff. I'll be connecting with people through throwing a dinner parties and having that kind of sensual connection with them, or going on a long walks with people and being a guide in nature, for example. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you so much for all of your effort. I mean, it's been I feel like we've just scratched the surface, in fact, with our moon journeys. And I'm wondering, and speaking out loud here, whether, I don't know, we need to talk about, I mean, if we could run a course or something so that if people were interested, that there would be, to be able to go, your slides have been fantastic, whether we could, there would be an opportunity to go further into detail with those because yeah, I mean, it's so rich.
It is. I mean, I love talking about the moon. And when we think that this is just the beginning, and then we haven't explored the Venus cycle, and Venus cycle creates this beautiful pentagram as she dances with the moon and the earth. She literally in a space creates this beautiful five petal um, uh, flower. And actually, in the chart, when she turns the direction, she literally creates a little pentagram.
Wow.
When you think about those cycles, when we think about the cycle of Saturn, again, in our language, it exists, the idea of 7 year each. Saturn cycle is roughly 28, 30 years. So every 7 years, we have either square, again, our first quarter, we have the opposition, the fullness of Saturn, and then we have the last quarter. Um, again, what's happening in those cycles? What do you start and what matures in there? So there's so much to explore. But even when you concentrate on the moon, I mean, you can literally just talk to a client for 2 hours just about the moon. And when we think about how busy the chart is, I mean, we can talk about chart for years and not explore it fully.
Yeah.
And Natalie, you're putting me on a spot. I mean, I love the idea of a course and talking about the moon, more often. So maybe we
Yeah.
need to take that offline.
Yeah, we can talk about that, and if anyone has any feedback
Yeah,
from this podcast, I'd love to hear from you. So
yeah.
I've really enjoyed it, Monica. I mean, amazing.
Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
was that clear? So I would love to hear. I don't know if the people are still here with online with us, but if there is a feedback, was that clear? I was again, my Aquarius sun and my Taurus moon is trying to make something that can be quite airy fairy, quite full of astrological jargon,
Mhm.
really quite accessible. I really want people to go back to that cycle that really should be ours by, our right by birth, connecting with that nature, not just under our feet, but above our heads as well. So I hope that it was, clear. Um,
Yeah, I think you did that beautifully. And yeah, thank
Thank
you for
you.
your consideration. And, for the beginning of something, hopefully, that there can be more about that. And we'd love you to come back and do another talk if you'd be willing. It's been,
Yes.
yeah, really fascinating and interesting. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And we have to say goodbye now because we're out of time. Karen
Thank you
said
so much.
it was accessible, applicable, and inspirational. Hooray!
Thank you.
There
Thank you
you go,
so much.
Monica. Oh, take care now.
Thank you.
Okay, all
Bye-bye.
the best. Bye. Bye.